Welcome to Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we are an industry site for professionals to learn and deepen their skill set. Every week, we bring on film professionals to discuss their work, and this is made possible by our sponsors, OWC Digital. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking needs. This week, I'm joined by John Matyśiak, cinematographer for Mom Jovi, Still the King, and more recently, the Western Old Henry. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you for having me.
I guess. Well, I want to talk to you about Old Henry. Was this your first Western that you'd worked on?
Yeah, Potsy and I, the director and I, kind of worked together on a television series, Still the King. And
Mhm.
so after that, I think the natural conversations or kind of progressions of kind of what we both were wanting to do was like do a feature at some point. I know he's always trying to kind of get another feature off the ground. And so he sent me several scripts, and this one in particular was just something that really resonated with I think both of us. You know,
Mhm.
he had written this kind of amazing script that was it was minimal, it was stark, it was kind of straight to the point. It had all these elements that seemed totally achievable. On like this on a micro or like on an independent film budget. And
Mhm.
so right away we got really excited that we thought we could do it, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, I remember the first time he sent me the script, I got really excited about it because it moves. It's a character piece. It's about
Mhm.
a father and a son, and then these things just happen. These events, these plot points just happen, and you go
Mhm.
for it. You're not waiting for characters to kind of make a decision and then something to happen. They're kind of thrust into this world, um, and it kind
Yeah.
of doesn't stop until the end. You know, it just is a constant ride.
Well, it reminded me of like Taken, or one of those ones where it's like we have a guy with a special set of skills that you're not aware of, you know, that are gonna come out, or you're gonna see. How did you come up with the look for this show, or sorry, the movie?
Oh man, I think when you get handed this Western genre, right? When you get handed
Mhm.
the idea of filming a Western, you're stepping into really, really big shoes to fill. Of like, for at least for me as a cinematographer, every great Western has kind of come before us, and then over
Right.
and throughout time, those Westerns have been reinvented, reimagined. You've got the spaghetti Westerns of Sergio Leone, and then how they influenced American filmmakers like Tarantino to then like show us it again, but with a kind of more of an American twist. So it's interesting because it ultimately is kind of in this American art form.
Mhm.
And when I was doing kind of some of my early research, what I found out was really interesting was that when the kind of the movies were starting to be made and at the turn of the century in the 20s and then even into some of the 30s, but really more in the early 20s, there was actually like outlaws and gunslingers that would act in movies. So you had this strange kind of coincidence of the Wild West and the frontier life coming to an end, and the people that had kind of survived actually influenced some of the early westerns that were made because they were actually former gunslingers, former bank robbers,
Mhm.
and they were actually acting in film. So that's so interesting. But in terms of creating a look or being inspired, um, I've always been a fan of the Western genre. I remember as a kid going to the video store and trying to negotiate with my parents, like which Western could I watch, which one was not as violent as the other ones. And I remember like watching Tombstone over and over and over
Oh my
again
god, I watched that over and over
till the
again.
VHS was just done. And
Yeah.
so I think that was just, I think any filmmaker, not any filmmaker, but I'm from the South, I'm from Texas, and
Mhm.
so the Western culture was just we were kind of born into it, in
Yeah.
terms of like just everything about cowboys and cookouts and barbecues and line dances, the whole thing. And so I think getting a call to do a Western is kind of a dream as a cinematographer. But in terms of kind of specifically and kind of term coming up with the look, I immediately went down this rabbit hole or this like research just time period in which I really wanted to get into these photographs of like the actual, I wanted to kind of try to experience, for lack of a better word, what it would have been like to be on a farm in 1906. Like, what would that have really kind of been like? And so there's these photographers that, as the advent of photography was coming around, they were photographing. They were photographing Native Americans. They were photographing frontier life. They were photographing cowboys. So you have all this great, amazing kind of portraiture from that time. And there's like these French surveyors that I kind of leaned into a little bit. Timothy Sullivan, William Jackson. These are kind of guys that had this like film equipment. They would just like travel the American West and kind of document it. Obviously, Matthew Brady's photography influenced me quite a bit as well, just with his war photography, the Civil War. And so what I kind of got from those images was trying to like look into what the actual daily life was like. And it seems stark at times. It seemed really isolating. It was a really harsh life, I feel like, for the most part. And at least that's what I was kind of getting out of these photographs. And so this emotion of this starkness and this harshness really kind of influenced what I was feeling. And so I tried to take that feeling and put that into kind of every next step of kind of designing a look. Obviously, you go to film references. And so we looked at, kind of older classics of Ford and Hawks, and then, more modern classics, kind of like The Assassination of Jesse James and Hostels. And we didn't look at Unforgiven, but obviously that was kind of one of these more modern kind of neo-Westerns. So, and I think those feelings and emotions I had kind of going through these photographs influenced decisions, why we're doing our camera tests, why we're doing our lens tests, our lighting tests, into just kind of what felt right. When we put up a different lens, what kind of lens does that make you feel seeing this image? What imperfections resonate with you in terms of creating that look. And we knew we wanted a very realistic and authentic look. This wasn't going to be a super stylized look by any means, just because the story is at the heart just a father and son. And we wanted to just be really kind of true to that. And so, yeah, we kind of leaned into the grit and the muck and the texture of what that would have been like.
What were some of those, I guess, imperfections that you're sort of talking about to make it feel more authentic?
Some of those older lenses from the turn of the century have these like weird fringes on the sides, or the halation would kind of bleed through some of the backlight, or just the different lighting conditions. So you're constantly kind of trying to figure out what imperfections feel authentic to this time period versus some that maybe would feel inauthentic. We at one point we kind of tested and discussed a bunch of kind of vintage lenses, because immediately you kind of go that way. You're like, oh, let's use some vintage glass. But it's just something about it just felt almost too forced or too heavy-handed. Those kind of, either a Tadeo or a Hawk look, if you get really kind of detailed into the different types of lens manufacturers, those kind of distorted the image almost too much at times, and kind of felt somewhat even kind of more modern, because it kind of feels like out of the 50s and 60s and 70s, where we kind of wanted to get more of this kind of timeless look going.
Is there so why did you go with the Arri Alexa Mini? What was the decision behind that?
I mean, the decision behind going for the Mini kind of stems from our want to shoot a wide frame, this kind of cinematic anamorphic image. And so as soon as that kind of happened, it was like I didn't feel there was a camera at that time that could provide me a better resolution or even kind of color space for that. We had discussed the Mini LF, but in terms of anamorphic, we really didn't see the kind of need to kind of like increase the resolution, because we're always going for like a textured look. Initially we talked about 35. I think every director and cinematographer that even discussed the idea of shooting a Western, you talk about 35. I mean, how can you not? And for a long time, we were trying to figure out how we could do it, shooting 3-perf, 2-perf. And then it just became one of these things that were outside the budget scope. But at that same time that we were having these conversations about film and the look of the film, I've been working on some commercial campaigns where we were testing out this idea of shooting digitally and then printing back to film, and then taking that film print and then coloring it. And so we had done some tests and some experiments with some different projects. And so I felt pretty comfortable kind of achieving a certain look and texture in post with the mini, paired with kind of more modern glass, so it can hold up kind of through that process.
Oh, that's really cool. So you mentioned your commercial work. What is it, or how did you, or I guess, what have you learned from shooting commercials that you use as a cinematographer on features or television shows?
That's a really great question, Gordon. That's a really great question. Because usually it's kind of the other way around or something, you know. I mean, there's something about on a commercial, especially like a 1 or 2 day commercial, where you have to kind of, there's no punting the football. There's no, we can do it later in the week. You have to do it now, you know, and you have to kind of perform for that day. There's no moving things around. And so I think that just that kind of that high performance drive of like you needing to accomplish everything within the day and being really efficient with it and being confident, I think, with those decisions in the moment. I think that kind of bleeds over into how we kind of worked on this movie, because we were really, I think, efficient with all the prep that the director and I had done. And so we were kind of confident in our choices. Because I think sometimes on kind of a feature length project, sometimes you kind of get in the weeds about little things here and there. We just didn't really have time for that once we were shooting. I guess also my process of experimentation and kind of camera tests and lens tests, I'm just a huge fan of that. I try to do it on every commercial, even if it's a 1 or 2 day commercial. I try to kind of get into there and kind of see and just experiment, so, and test. And so I think that process or that workflow really helped us on this project.
So you mentioned also that you, with the director of Old Henry, you'd worked previously, and I'm always interested in how you develop those long-term working relationships. So how did you guys meet, and how did you guys sort of form this lasting relationship?
Yeah, this is a great story. I love this story. So a good friend of mine, Blake McClure, who's an amazing cinematographer. He kind of set the stage and the look of Drunk History. That kind of what broke him as a cinematographer. And he's gone on to do so much stuff, American Horror Story, so many different things. And so he had done season 1 of this television show called Still the King, which was like a half-hour scripted comedy. His schedule, I don't think, allowed for him to come back and do the second season. But I had met Patsy for 1 day, because when Blake was in town shooting it, I just said, hey, if you need any help, I'll come out and just whatever, camera operate, I'll just do whatever. Let's go hang out together. And so I got brought on 1 day to do a day of second unit kind of action stuff. So when I met Patsy, I think the assistant director introduced us, and he's like, hey, this is Patsy. He's the showrunner of the show. He's also the director of the second unit stuff. And today we're just going to have this giant fight between 30 Elvis impersonators and 30 Johnny Cash impersonators. And basically today we're just going to do action stuff. And so they're beating each over the heads with guitars. And then we're working with a stunt coordinator who we're still friends with and who worked on kind of everything we've all worked together on. And so, in that 1 day, we just kind of connected. We kind of vibed each other, I think. And just, we had a very similar sense of sensibility, of humor, of work ethic, of if we need to just kind of move fast to get it done, we move fast to get it done. We knew when to be precious about things and when not to be precious about things. And so that was just an amazing and fun day. It was just one of those fun days where you're like, this is, we get to do this as filmmakers, like just a day of stunts with Elvis and Johnny Cash impersonators. And so when it came time to do the second season, I think Blake recommended me, and then he called me, and Patsy was like, do you want to have coffee? We sat down for a coffee meeting. He's like, hey, do you want to do the second season? And I was like, absolutely. And so then we just had an amazing collaboration for that kind of year that we did that show together. I mean, we were just immediately in sync. We would send references, and he's just like, yes. And I'm like, yes. And we're both just like, we are on the same page. And so, yeah, we just love working together. It's one of those relationships where you never feel micromanaged for your decisions. You're just kind of
Mhm.
supported, you're supported 100% because we all have the same, or at least a similar aesthetic to what we enjoy watching. And so translating that into a Western is like, oh, well, we know that collaboration is going to be amazing. It's like, now we have to
Mhm.
figure out what we're going to do and what movie we want to make.
So, what's your relationship with with the colorist of Old Henry? Because that it plays such an important role in helping you finish the way it looks.
Yeah, I worked with Derek Hansen did our DI. He's an
Mhm.
amazing colorist. I worked with him on music videos and commercials. So we already had kind of a great working collaboration together. And so when it came time to kind of finish Old Henry, I mean, we had done, I developed kind of my own LUTs for things. And so we
Mhm.
had come up with a LUT for Old Henry. And so basically what we were taking into the DI was 97% or 95% there for the most
Mhm.
part. It was kind of what we were seeing in camera on the monitor was also like what we kind of finished the film with. And so he was really great in kind of evening things out. And there's certain scenes that he obviously we spent more time on than others just because lighting conditions and that kind of thing. But no, he was really just an amazing collaborator and kind of seeing what we were doing on set and knowing the look we wanted and just kind of facilitating that. I think a true artist can kind of find their own voice within someone else's voice. And
Mhm.
so he was just instrumental to that, as well as my DIT, Scotty, right? Just in terms of helping the dailies workflow, because we would kind of color the dailies as we were going a little bit and make just minor adjustments. I was really happy with the consistency of the look through all.
Mhm.
I think an executive producer at one point said, "Do we even need to color? It looks great right now." And I was, I'm flattered, but also terrified, at the same time. I think he was just joking, but,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's something that, is something that, finishing your film, it's one thing to shoot your film. It's another thing to finish it the right way. And so I was really kind
Yeah.
of blessed to have these artists collaborating with me on this project that really took it kind of upon themselves to kind of do the work.
What would you say was the most challenging scene for you to shoot in Old Henry?
There's multiple challenging scenes. I mean, I think from a lighting standpoint, we had kind of a significant night exterior
Mhm.
sequence. And, anytime you're kind of doing a period film, you're working with where there's no electricity, it's always a challenge, I think, to kind of motivate lighting, make it feel natural and authentic.
Mhm.
And especially on kind of the look we were going for, this kind of super realism. And so, yeah, my gaffer, Matty Ware, I mean, we kind of would experiment and test out kind of different versions of our night exterior. Like we would call wrap one day and then we'd put a light somewhere and be like, oh, how are these shadows affecting it? Because we knew once we got to that actual night exterior, we didn't have a lot of time and resources to kind of like change our plan. And so we really kind of dialed in what we wanted to do ahead of time. But that was really tough. That I said to the AD, I think on that day, I said, we are an outnumbered army going up against someone, going up this impossible force. Like that is what tonight is. Tonight is us being outmanned and outgunned, and we still have to win,
Yeah.
and just because it's limited resources. So like that becomes very specific lighting placement that works for a lot of different things. And so we ended up lighting up half a mile or quarter mile to a half a mile of this hill, because out in front of our cabin, what we look out to is this giant hill. And then
Mhm.
that goes on and there's hills behind and trees behind it. So you're trying to figure out how to light it in a way that feels like moonlight, but not overlit. Because I'm not a, when it comes to like lighting a Western night exterior, it's tricky because you don't want it
Mhm.
to feel overlit or hyper stylized. So there's one film in particular that I really referenced was The Witch, because I feel like
Oh yeah.
the night exteriors in that film just feel like night exteriors. They don't feel like lit
Yeah.
night exteriors. So I kind of, obviously we kind of did our own approach, but I think just that mindset of like, oh, we can go this dark, we can do this to kind of create that. So that
Yeah.
was super challenging. And I don't know how our kind of grip electric, I mean, I felt like
This poor group of electrics.
I mean, they were, I told them afterwards, I was like, you guys just did the work of like 15 individuals.
Yeah.
And we did not have that large of a crew, on that. So, and the conditions were like freezing. It was raining. It was
Yeah.
almost below freezing,
Yeah.
So it was really, yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge. It was one of the toughest days I've had on set, but we
Yeah.
came out the other end and we got everything we needed. Because every crew member just kind of pushed through. We all just kind of did it.
It's funny that you talked about it being freezing, because the last set I worked on, and then I was like, you know what, I shouldn't work on sets, was in the middle of nowhere, in the woods, negative whatever it was Celsius, freezing, and it was a night shoot, and I was just like, yeah, I can't do this anymore because it was so cold. So my last question for you, we've been stuck in this pandemic for going on 2 years now. Is there a show or a movie you've discovered on streaming networks that people should check out?
I guess it's considered streaming. I mean, I think like most people in the film industry, Succession
Oh yeah, yeah.
is just one of those shows that grabs you and
Mhm.
just takes you on this ride. And the reason that it does, I think they do such a good job of creating realism in it. It's shot on
Mhm.
film, so the highlights feel a certain way. Like everything just feels more authentic and real.
Mhm.
So we were pretty big fans of Succession, my wife and I. We also watched the morning show. I really enjoyed that
Oh
as
yeah.
well, just because it kind of involves some kind of topics that are in kind of the general psyche right now, and kind of it raised these like tough questions.
Yeah.
So I think the morning show and Succession were some of the ones we were kind of binging, I guess, among like everything else we could get our hands
Yeah.
on, I guess, during the pandemic.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. I hope everyone can check out Old Henry and check out that night exterior and see how tough it was.
Well, that's our show for today. I want to thank you for joining us again, John. And I also, of course, want to thank our sponsors, OWC Digital. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking needs. I'm your host, Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.